We're live on YouTube now, Chair.
Thank you very much. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the EDEI Scrutiny Panel. Can I remind all participants that normal rules of procedure apply? For example, comments and questions need to be put through the chair. As we are meeting virtually, the proceedings may take slightly longer, so your patience is appreciated. Whilst members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able to actively comment on the proceedings. As this meeting is being live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? So, agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. I've got apologies from councillors Hubbard, Morstan and Story. Is there any other apologies? Okay. Agenda item number 2. Agenda item number 2 is. I'm sorry. I am sorry, panel. I'm not feeling very well today, and I'm stammering quite a lot. Agenda item number 2 is declarations of interest. Have we got any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay. Agenda item number 3 are the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 12th of January 2022. They're in the report pack. Can I have somebody to move them, or is there anyone who wants to comment on them?
Move them, Chair.
That's a good. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think Councillor Branson wanted to speak.
Branson, yeah. Sorry, Councillor. Yeah.
Councillor, yeah.
You're muted, David.
You're muted.
Sorry, my fault. Okay. Yeah, page 5. If you take the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th paragraph down, one measure is to introduce 20-mile-an-hour speed limits because low vehicles in urban areas naturally improve air quality. I'm assuming that's low speed of vehicles in urban areas naturally improve air quality. But is that the case? If vehicles go slower, doesn't that mean that they create more pollution? I'm just not clear on that. I thought it was the other way around. Do we know?
Councillor Arundel?
Yeah, I would argue that it's not proven unless there are statistics to prove that. I think it's more about 20 miles an hour is more about safety of pedestrians and such, rather than air quality, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think safety is certainly a factor.
I'll just bring Susan back in. Susan, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go back and recheck my notes and check with the officer if necessary, and I'll let the panel members know, and we'll get that updated. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So we'll come back on that then. Thanks for raising that point, Councillor Branson. Agenda item number 4 is the bus service update, and we have got the head of transport from the TVCA, Tom Bryant, with us, I think. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Chair.
Hi. So, have you got a presentation, Tom, or is it just a sort of a general update, and then we'll take questions? I'm not sure what.
Yeah. So I think I was asked at the last committee to come along, so I was just going to say a few words around some of the context, and then happy to take any questions if that works.
That's great. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, so I think we've talked about this at a previous meeting, but in effect, there's a few things just to make you aware of if you're not already. So the Combined Authority and all the 5 authorities have got a long history of working in partnership with the bus operators. Last year, the government published a new national bus strategy, which made a couple of requirements that we've needed to progress to sort of build on that existing partnership. So the 2 things we have to do is, one is develop what they call the bus service improvement plan, which we did and submitted to government back in October last year. And in effect, that sets out what we want to do to improve bus services. So it had a 5-point action plan that it was structured around. So one was around decarbonising the fleet. One was around looking at fares and what we can do to simplify fares and bring in targeted promotions for particular groups, such as young people. One was around customer experience and how we improve information provision. One was around infrastructure and what we can do on key bus corridors to make it more efficient for buses to travel along them, and also to improve the customer experience with things like waiting facilities. And the last one was how we look at the network and make sure that the network reflects the changes that are happening across the Tees Valley in terms of growth markets, and also ensuring our Tees Flex on-demand service integrates with that network. So they were the 5 priority actions. The BSIP's published on our website if you haven't had a look at it. We had to submit that to government, and the government said throughout that there's going to be some funding allocated to deliver that BSIP. So everything on there is dependent on how much funding we get. And although we submitted it back in October, we still haven't found out how much funding we might get. We're told that by the end of this month, by the end of February, we should have our funding allocation. And the next step would then be to sit down and work out how we allocate whatever funding we get across those priority areas. And I suspect the government will require us to probably produce a more detailed business case setting out how we'll do that. The other thing that the National Bus Strategy said is that you have to either go down a franchising route or develop what they call an enhanced partnership, which is what we're doing here, which is in effect a statutory agreement between ourselves, the 5 local highway authorities and the bus operators, setting out in effect how we would deliver the actions in that bus service improvement plan. Now, because everything is dependent on funding, what we've done to date is in effect develop a shell agreement that forms the basis of the plan. But as we get more confirmation around funding and what's actually deliverable, we can add in the detail. So that's what we've been working on. I guess the other key thing that's sort of sitting behind all of this is the impact of COVID on the bus industry. The government has been providing recovery funding to the bus industry, which is due to run out at the end of this financial year, although there's talk of it potentially being extended, because obviously the operators have had a huge impact in terms of their fare income. So when you overlay some of the financial challenges in terms of we don't know how quickly bus passengers are going to return, whether they're ever going to get back to what they were pre-COVID, and all of the impacts around that, and also what that means in terms of what we pay them for concessionary fares trips. There's a lot of uncertainty around the bus industry and their financial sustainability, which means there's a lot of issues we're trying to work through. So at the same time as we're trying to deliver these improvements, we're also trying to work with them to ensure that we've got a sustainable bus network across the Tees Valley. So that's where we are. As I say, there's lots of work going on. Your officers are involved in a lot of the working groups, and we work very closely with yourselves and the other authorities. And I think the next big thing we're waiting for, as I say, is this funding confirmation at the end of this month, which will enable us to do the next level of planning.
Thank you, Tom. Is there any questions from the panel members? Councillor Branson.
Tom, thank you very much for coming along. You obviously know I've been quite concerned about bus services for a while. I was just looking at the statistics, number of bus passengers down by 30%. That was before the epidemic. So it just shows the problem that we have. We had a meeting last night, on Monday night, the community council meeting, at which the issue of bus services was one of the key issues raised. And in particular, the lack of bus services, particularly in the south of Middlesbrough. This is an area where a lot of people are moving to. They're moving to Hemlington Grange. We're looking at new development in the south of Colby Newham at some stage in the future. But the services, the bus services are extremely limited. And there are no cross-town bus services from east to west. And you'll know that we put in a request for funding for such a service. I'm just concerned about the enhanced partnership system. I don't think it gives us enough clout. I don't think it gets the bus companies to actually provide the services. I just wondered what your view is on this, because obviously, if you look at the railway system, we have a franchising system, and that has the advantage that the operators are told what services they must run, and then they have to offer that service. Whereas under the enhanced partnership, they decide what services are going to be run. And I'm afraid my feeling at the moment, particularly what you were saying about the impact of COVID, is they're not going to run those services. And we're going to be lacking really very much in the way of bus services in the south of the town. That, of course, is having an impact on the area, particularly overcrowding the car parks at the Parkway Centre and things like that. So I just wonder what your views were on that, as whether we're going down the right line.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things on this. One is no one outside of London has yet introduced a franchising scheme. So Manchester are obviously starting, and I think Liverpool have started the process now. But it's a hugely complicated process involving multiple stages of legal process to get to that point. And in Manchester, I'm pretty sure one of the big operators has filed a legal challenge against it, because what the legislation says is before you can even attempt to pursue a franchising scheme, you've got to be able to demonstrate that the partnership approach hasn't worked. And that's a legal test you'd have to satisfy. And I don't think we're in that stage at all. The other thing is, it doesn't matter how you govern and run bus services, someone's got to pay for them. Now, obviously, the optimum scenario is there's enough people travelling on the buses to make them commercially viable, because we're very limited currently in terms of how much revenue we have to subsidise any services. So whilst franchising does give you the control, it doesn't necessarily mean you can deliver bus service enhancements, because someone's still got to pay for them. And if services aren't commercial, the only way to do that is to put in public subsidy, which obviously becomes very challenging. I think the other thing with franchising as well is how it would work is you would basically define the network you wanted and the services you wanted, and you would have to go to the market. So I have heard people talk about franchising taking away profit, but clearly the bus operators would still be bidding to run those services and there'd still be an element of profit. So I don't think franchising actually addresses the core problem, which is if a service isn't commercial, it requires public subsidy. So I think that the trick is what you were describing, that issue there is if there is new demand in the area and new housing, whether we can look at potentially kickstarting a service that then becomes commercially viable as people move into the area and we encourage more people to use that service.
Yeah, I think that would help if that would do the trick. I reserve my concerns on this, but certainly we do need a service in the south of Middlesbrough, given the vast amount of housing that's going in there and is planned to go in there. And our concern, and I know that there are other people on this panel have the same concerns, is that if we don't put the bus service in at the beginning, people will learn to go by car, and you'll end up with a situation where the demand isn't there. So if we can have that put in as soon as possible, that's what I'd like to do. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge on it is if the operators are saying that that service isn't commercially viable, as I say, somehow we need to find a way of subsidising it. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to use any public money we do have to kickstart services that have a chance of becoming commercial. So I think what we need to do on that one is actually look at what the demand is and see what potential we think there is for a service to become commercial, because otherwise you end up with a situation where it's forever going to be reliant on public subsidy, which does become challenging because we're all operating under difficult financial situations, particularly when it comes to revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Cooper, I know you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to echo what Councillor Bransell just said, I mean, Hemlington Grange is in my ward. I just find it amazing that we're putting in a huge estate there. There's still no bus service servicing it. There's no chance for the next year or so of bus servicing it. Yes, there is one that runs outside, but people living in the far reaches, if you like, of that estate will have to walk quite a way. And as Councillor Bransford just pointed out, they use other things, they use cars. And so the volume of cars, surely when we're doing these things, we should be looking at the transport and the bus services to start with, and it should be an integral part of the package, because a bus can't reverse, it's got to go round, so there's no route for it to go around there. So it's a personal thing with me, and I know Councillor Branson really has the strong feelings about it, we both do. The south of the town is not really served. There's plenty of buses, but they don't necessarily go to the places that people want them to go to. So we need to talk about this and need to sort of have a future plan, whereas the bus service is offered to people before they have another choice of going in the cars. Thanks, Chair.
I see Richard's on the call. I mean, there is always, I think I've talked about this with Councillor Branson, there is always the potential to capture developer contributions towards kickstarting bus services. But I know as a council and planning authority, you've got 101 other pressures on those developer contributions. So it's not easy. So the BSIP might provide a pot of funding, but as I say, I don't have any clarification from government yet on what that might be. But that's certainly one of the services we can look at as part of that process.
We have a bus service in Stainton because I went to Stagecoach and negotiated with them. That's how we got it back. It was purely through myself. So basically what we need to do is look at the full, not just the south of town, you're talking also about the new Stainsby development. We need to look across the Tees Valley and see where we need a bus service to, because otherwise the bus service will disappear because people will see them irrelevant, which will be terrible. Thank you.
And I think what we can do is I can work with your officers, because the more evidence we pull together about potential demand, the stronger the position is in terms of having a conversation with the bus operators. So, if we can demonstrate where the growth is, which we already have to a certain extent, but talk about where we think the demand is in the future, that helps in terms of those discussions and actually trying to persuade the operators to almost take a bit of a commercial risk in the early days with the potential for a service to be profitable in the longer term.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arundale?
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of issues here. Obviously, unless they're commercially viable, no bus operator is going to run a service and lose money. That would be madness to have them out of business. So the answer to that has been spoken about earlier, and that is that we either have a situation where we subsidise buses heavily, but that's a political decision, and I doubt any political party would say, well, what we'll do, we will subsidise buses heavily by taxing cars and other users to do that. And of course, that wouldn't go down particularly well with the majority of the public. But that would be the answer, to be honest. The other thing is, of course, at Middlesbrough, with all these developments, like we're talking about the south of Middlesbrough and the lack of bus services and such as that is a lack of infrastructure, the road. And I have a hobby horse about this Spine Road, which I think has got to go in. I know the mayor's anti it because it's a green policy with him, but it's, that could relieve the pressure, and we could run a bus route through there quite sensibly, which would be attractive to people and get people into the town centre and such as that in quite quick time. So that's my view on it. Whether that'll ever happen, I don't know, but I'd like to see that happen. Thank you.
Just a couple of things on there. One thing we can do is, obviously, the aim of the bus service improvement plan is to get more people on buses, because that provides the operators with more opportunity to take some commercial risks. So, as an example, we know that sort of younger people are less inclined to want to own a car and are more inclined to want to have sort of the flexibility to use buses and other modes of transport. And we see that as a real growth market that we want to focus on. And if we can get more younger people using buses on some of the more busier routes, that then potentially creates opportunities, because the operators have got more revenue in their pockets, to look at some of these more peripheral services where there is less demand. So that's one thing. And I suppose the other thing is we have got a big programme of capital investment looking at how we prioritise buses on some of the core corridors, like Linthorpe Road and others. The challenge with all of this, again, is that there's limited road space, and as Richard will know, it can become quite difficult when you try and allocate road space to buses or active travel. Even when it's the right thing to do, it's not easy. And I know the active travel scheme we put in on Linthorpe Road has been very difficult for Richard and his officers to work through with businesses on there. So none of this is straightforward, but I think there is a commitment to make bus priority improvements. But obviously that has to be worked through the statutory processes as you have as a local highway authority.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Fergus?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned about Tees Flex. I was just wondering, I haven't heard many good things about it, and I was just wondering, is it something that's going to continue, or is it something that's getting wound up?
So it's a 3-year pilot that started in February 2020, so it will run until February next year in terms of the 3-year pilot, and obviously we'll need to take a decision on what happens after that. It's carrying about 1,500 people a week now. It was brought in basically to cover areas that don't have a commercial bus service, because we didn't want to be in direct competition with existing commercial services. Despite COVID, it has seen really strong passenger growth, and it's still attracting lots of new passengers, and it's also attracting a different demographic. So there's a much higher proportion of younger people and working age people, as opposed to normal services, which are usually dominated by concessionary pass holders. One of the challenges is trying to aggregate trips, because obviously it's an on-demand service, and it's balancing that on-demand nature against getting as many people as we can on the buses, because the more people obviously we get on them, the more commercially viable and the less subsidy it requires. So that's an ongoing challenge, but we've got things like fare promotions to encourage multiple bookings and that kind of thing. So I think it has been a success, and the customer feedback has been extremely high. But again, the point I made earlier is where you're running a bus in areas where you haven't got a commercial demand, it is always going to rely on a subsidy. Now, what we're trying to do is minimise the subsidy that Teesflex needs, but I think the stark reality is running public transport in areas with low population densities or low demand is always going to require a public subsidy. And then I guess the question is therefore whether that public subsidy is seen as value for money for the benefits it brings. So without Teesflex, obviously 1,500 people a week couldn't be making that trip by public transport, and I guess you have to weigh up that against the cost.
Yeah, it's quite interesting you're saying that obviously the younger demographic are using it. I can imagine that's more to do with the technology you use to book. Is there a way of phoning or other ways of getting booking rather than just using the app?
Yeah, so you can book by the phone as well. So we brought in both. I think just with younger people, obviously, especially with more flexible working patterns, some people are just thinking about having the fixed cost of a car that they're not going to be using every day. And also I'm speaking to more and more people who have previously had 2 cars and now saying, well, actually, we could probably get away with having 1 car if we started to make some of our travel via different modes like Teesflex or rail or other modes as well. So I think COVID has created an opportunity to start to try and influence behaviours around active travel and public transport, and we need to capitalise on that.
So if the passenger numbers increase, would it become viable in the sense that it wouldn't cost too much to run the usage? So is that a possibility?
So I think we can certainly reduce the level of subsidy it requires, but I don't think we'll ever get to a point where it can run, certainly on the areas it covers now, without subsidy. If we looked at integrating it more into the commercial network, which we are exploring with the operators through the partnership, then potentially, but given its current operating area, so it covers, large rural areas of East Cleveland, for example, it's never going to become commercially viable in those areas because there just isn't the volume of people to get on the bus to actually cover the costs of it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Saunders.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I listened to all the remarks and all other councillors. I think there's a reality check needs to be in here. Bus companies are private companies, so they provide services to make a profit. And my previous occupation for 37 years was in the taxi trade. Taxis now cheaper than buses. You need to compete. You've got a couple of people wanting a taxi. It's cheaper than getting a bus. They'll rather wait in the house, get the car to the door, and wherever the destination is. People are not prepared to walk to a bus stop anymore. That's all I want to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. You can come back on that, Tom, if you want, but I don't necessarily think that was a question, it was just a point. Councillor Branson, I can see your hand is up as well.
Yeah, Tom, you've made this point a number of times and others, that routes must be profitable. But in the past, what happens in Europe is that profitable bus routes subsidise unprofitable bus routes. There are going to be bus routes which are never going to be profitable. But unless you subsidise them, that's what you've got to do. You've got to subsidise them from the more profitable routes. Now, that has an impact on the profits of the bus companies. And I appreciate that. That's why they don't want to go down the franchising line. But the simple fact of the matter is our bus companies make very big profits, so much so, and that countries abroad in Europe invest in our bus companies in order to get a return to subsidise their public transport systems in Germany, in the Netherlands. I mean, this is daft, it really is. It's about time that we tackle the bus companies here. They are taking us for a ride, if you don't mind the pun. It's a good pun. The fact of the matter is that you know, bus companies can make a profit, but what they might have to do is to make a smaller profit. But we're not going to be able to do that through enhanced partnership, because it's just going to say no, we're only going to run routes and make money for us. And that was my point, really. I don't know whether other people agree with that.
Thank you, Councillor Branson. Tom, you can go back on that if you want, but again, that was just a general point.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think I said it earlier. Just because you bring in franchising doesn't take profit away. And particularly in somewhere like the Tees Valley, where we've got two dominant operators, if we were to go down a franchising route, you would almost have a very limited market, in that it would be very difficult, I think, for another provider to come in, given the infrastructure costs of setting up a new operation in the Tees Valley. So a Arriva and Stagecoach would almost have you over a barrel. And when they bid for the contracts that you wanted to run, they're still going to build in profit to those contract prices. So franchising doesn't take away profit. I think that's a misconception out there. And in terms of your point about cross-subsidising routes, I think if we can get more people onto the busier routes, as I said earlier, there is the potential through the partnership to have those kind of conversations around, well, actually, given that we've increased passenger levels on this core service, you now need to take a risk in terms of putting on a more peripheral service where there is more of a commercial risk, but actually because we've increased your profit margin on another service, on balance, we need to persuade them to take that risk. And that's the kind of thing we can explore in the partnership. We can't tell them what to do, but the partnership does give us more leverage, particularly when we're putting money into things like bus priority measures. So it's about, I guess, using the investment that we're making as a lever to try and persuade them to do more and to take more commercial risks. But you're right, it's not easy. It's always going to be a negotiation, and we are trying to negotiate with commercial bus operators who do have to look at their profit margin. There's no getting away from that.
See, I think they have got us over a barrel already, and I think we have to change the situation. But that, I know, is a natural issue. But thanks very much, Tom. Thanks for answering the questions on that.
Yeah, thanks for attending, Tom. I think there's just obviously a general frustration among all panel members, which we probably get from our residents, of lack of bus services. And at the last meeting we had, we were talking about chicken and egg, because, you know, the title of this scrutiny panel is Economic Development, Environment and Infrastructure, and bus services kind of underpins like every facet of what we look at. And for you to have services that are commercially viable, you sort of have to have the buses there first for people to be convinced, like, okay, they're going to be reliable, they're going to go where I need them to go within reason, and they're going to be affordable. I think the only way you get that is by having political will from the likes of the Tees Valley Mayor and the funding to go with that. So I think from your point of view, Tom, like I want to say thank you for joining us today. Obviously, it's not always a pleasant experience, but you've done very well. So thank you very much. And you are welcome to stay, but obviously you don't have to. But thanks for your time, Tom. Basically.
Okay.
This morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Next agenda item is agenda item number 5, the Green Strategy Review. We've got the Head of Culture, Charlotte Nichol, with us. Hi, Charlotte. Have you got a presentation, Charlotte, or is it a verbal update?
No, it's a presentation actually, and I believe that is it Joanne that's going to be sharing that, Joanne?
Yeah, I'll just pop it on for you now, Charlotte.
Thanks so much, that's brilliant.
Thank you. And then, are you wanting to take questions as you go along, or do you want to take questions at the end?
I'll take questions at the end if that's all right. It's not a very long presentation, so yeah, I've left plenty of time for questions.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Hi everyone, my name's Charlotte Nichol. I'm Head of Culture at Middlesbrough Council. I'm going to talk to you about the green strategy and specifically the strand culture and communities. I'm going to start, Joe, if you could just click onto the next slide, please, by talking through the objectives. So these are quite high level objectives. It represents the ambitious level nature of these objectives, represents the fact that this is a long-term strategy and not something that will be achieved in 5 years, 10 years, but actually an incredibly long time. So we're looking to develop a town-wide approach to environmentalism with our arts organisations in Middlesbrough. We've got a 20-year vision that all of our organisations are carbon neutral by 2040. We want to increase public awareness and engagement in green issues. Culture is a brilliant way to engage with people. We've seen that on a number of occasions within our service, that we can engage people in issues that perhaps they might not be as interested in engaging with, using culture as a medium to do so. We're going to be increasing public engagements with our open spaces. So we have amazing parks in Middlesbrough and we've got brilliant assets of our parks. So we're looking at really increasing footfall and engagement in our parks. And I'll come on to some successes with that over the past year or so. And really we're wanting to be known as having some really forward-thinking, innovative parks. So we're looking at models from across the globe, really, in terms of modelling our ambition for our park. So looking at Middlesbrough being recognised as a place nationally and hopefully internationally as a place with the most innovative parks by 2040. We want a cultural capital plan for Middlesbrough. We have a number of really key cultural assets, one being, for example, our town hall, which has recently had a huge amount of investment. But we also have other buildings, both that are council owned and not council owned, across the town. So we're looking to develop a plan for acquiring funding in order to maintain those really important some historic and heritage buildings and the activity that goes on in there. And then finally, increase access to culture for communities in Middlesbrough. And I think that's across our service and across the whole of the cultural sector. That's what we're ultimately aiming to do. And we will be using our open spaces as one of the key drivers for that, because for me, our open spaces and our parks and our farm are the ultimate kind of democratic cultural venue. You know, they have there's very little worry about people going into parks, so we really want to increase the level of visitors and engagement in our parks. So if we go on to the next slide, Joanne, please. Great. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the successes that we've had in year one. So we've had some new events at Newham Grange Farm. We've got a fabulous new covered space in Newham Grange Farm, which talks about the journey from field to plate. We've got a brilliant new beehive in there, which I'll show you a picture of in a second. So that space is dedicated to environmentalism as a whole, really, and the story of the farm and the story of food. We have had an increase in visitors year on year, and we've actually had an increase in visitors over the past 2 years, despite COVID. We have successfully implemented new events in our parks, including Nightfall, which was a partnership with Stella Projects, which I'll talk about further. But we had an additional 20,000 visitors to our park, to Stewart's Park, in 4 days, which is absolutely fantastic. So we're going to be looking to build on that. We have built a new investment prospectus for cultural capital, which outlines our plans as a cultural sector for the whole of the town and our heritage sector for the whole of the town. And this is a really persuasive document for external funders. As an example, we've currently got a £5 million bid in with the Arts Council to fund a number of areas across our town, a number of heritage buildings across our town, including £2.5 million for Central Library. We find out in the next 3 weeks, so I'm constantly on edge checking to make sure that we've not got that notification yet. We have a new Holiday Action Fund programme for young people in our parks. I'll show you a few pictures from that, but I visited that at Christmas time, which was absolutely fantastic. Our parks and museums are working collaboratively on that so that we're engaging with young people, encouraging them to think of our parks as cultural venues in themselves and our open spaces so that they come back with their families. We've secured some funding for an eco festival, and the planning is underway for that. And we have secured a huge amount of investment for the parks, which I'd just like to read to you, which I've got to get onto a document to make sure I've got all of the figures right. So we have had £100,000 for Albert Park capital investment. We've got £45,000 at Stuart Park for Section 106 funding. We are just in the process of discussing with the Lawn Tennis Association investment from them for the tennis courts up to £90,000. We've had funding from the Holiday Action Fund. We've got some Arts Council funding, which will pay for a number of events in the park. We've got a number of activities and events in the park, including circus, fairy tales on ice potentially, party in the park, Middlesbrough Mela, and a number of delivery, kind of sports delivery as well within the park. So that's a summary of our success in year one. So if you could go to the next slide, Joe. Thanks very much. This is an example just of our 1, 2, 3, probably about 6 of our 20,000 visitors at Stuart Park participating in our Nightfall event, which brought so many people to the park, and we intend to build on. It was a light event. Some of you may have been, hopefully some of you may have been already. It was really fantastic. Next slide, please, Joanne. This is our live beehive in Newham Grange Farm as part of our covered area. We do activities in this in the farm itself. We've done things like basket weaving, we've done nature walks, we've done lots of different activities, so that's a new strand of delivery for us. Thanks very much, Joanne. This is a brilliant picture. It is inside. I did try and get one from the parks, but we didn't have one. But this is our Holiday Action Fund programme. So it's for young people who have had free school meals during the holidays. And we are particularly, working with these young people to deliver a programme across the parks, our open spaces and our museums. So we're really using our open spaces as venues in themselves. Thanks very much, Joanne. Finally, just an example of the way that we're working together with partners. We have a cultural partnership here in Middlesbrough. We have 20 arts organisations that are all working together. We're also engaging with partners internally in the council and externally in other sectors as well. So we've invited people to the Middlesbrough Cultural Partnership from external organisations, and we're looking at inviting the food partnership next to our next cultural partnership meeting, and just to sort of demonstrate that we are working collaboratively. It's not necessarily about the council delivering everything. MEMA, for example, are working very closely with the Tees Valley Nature Partnership and delivering a number of quite exciting projects as part of that. So we are working collaboratively on this. Next slide, please, Joanne. So our aspirations for year 2 are to really build on our cultural programme in our parks and ensure that they are environmentally sustainable whilst bringing additional people into the parks. And we have secured some funding to deliver an eco festival. We're just in the process of planning that with partners, so I can't give you any more information about what that will look like, but it will certainly build on our success with and our partnership, I suppose, with Environment City and the town meal. If you could just go to the next slide, please. I wanted to talk about challenges and opportunities here. The challenges really are that there are no additional resources or capacity for the green strategy. So we're delivering the green strategy within our current budgets. We are sort of really trying to embed the ethos of the green strategy in everything that we do as a service, in addition to working with partners externally to put on you know, additional kind of activities such as the Stella Projects Nightfall event in the parks, or indeed our capital investment prospectus, which has been put together by over 20 organisations collaboratively. And hopefully I'll have good news, you know, in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have £5 million for the town, which would be brilliant as well. And then finally, opportunities, as I said, I've talked about partnership working quite a lot. We'll be building on that sort of partnership working over the coming years, because that's key for us to deliver our ambitions within the resources that we have, and also our assets. So we have, just as I said at the beginning, brilliant assets in terms of our open spaces, the expertise internally, and our partnerships that we have. So as another example, we're working with the National Trust on quite a major event, which is still embargoed at the moment, but we're really looking forward to that. So I'm just wondering if you could do the next slide. Thank you very much, Joanne. So in conclusion, our green strategy for culture and communities is really ambitious. It requires a huge amount of partnership working. It's challenging because we haven't got additional resource for it, but we're absolutely committed to delivering on the green strategy. And personally, it's really my bag, so I'm really passionate about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was a really good presentation. Thank you. Councillor Furness?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was really good, that, Charlotte. I like the idea. Obviously, you said innovative parks, but then I was going to ask a question, what does that mean? But it's about using the assets that we have in different ways rather than just be a park. Like the light show in the winter was really good. I never went myself, but I had friends that said it was great. And I was just wondering about Albert Park. Obviously, you said there was some funding. Then was the £90,000 from the tennis courts? Is that for Albert Park? I'm assuming, because they're the only public.
It is, yeah. It's for Albert Park. So it's we're currently in negotiations around that. It hasn't totally been confirmed, but it's looking fairly likely. And that will obviously, I mean, having spent a lot of time in Albert Park, that's going to be really transformational, having that new tennis court for the space. So yeah, that's correct.
So is it repairing the old tennis court, or is it obviously the lawn association? Does that mean it's a grass tennis court? No, it won't be, will it?
No. It's resurfacing the tennis court. And I have to be careful of what I say here, because I'm not a tennis expert, so I might be yeah, but it's resurfacing the tennis court there. And yeah, we may be looking at an external provider to deliver that for us as well.
I was wondering, I always find those tennis courts, like we have a lot of, like obviously there's a lot of courts there, but that haven't obviously been serviced in a while. I do think that the provision for the tennis courts, it's always, I feel like there's too many, and I feel like the space could be better used for like a mugger or basketball courts, considering the, you know, people want to play different sports now. I was wondering if that has ever been a possibility, or the change of use of some of the tennis courts.
I know that we're having a look at muggers, Councillor Furness. So I'd like to come back to you with where we're at with it, because to be honest, I'm just not 100% sure, and I want to give you the right answer. So I'll come back to you on that.
But yeah, I just want Albert Park to be considered, because there's a few in the area, but Albert Park will obviously be a really great location for, like, obviously a good mugger and different use courts, be it football, basketball, rather than just tennis.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, and I'll just have a chat to my colleague, and I'll come back to you on that, Councillor Furness. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next is Councillor Saunders.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd also like to thank Charlotte for that presentation. I've got a couple of comments and a couple of questions, if that's okay, Chair. Regarding the funding for the parks, although the park is not in my ward, but it's still in East Middlesbrough, you never mentioned Pallister Park getting any money. And obviously I'm thinking previous, I believe the members of the Bowling Green was complaining about the condition of that Bowling Green within Pallister Park. And as I say, it's not in my ward, but I'm sure the councillors that's in the ward will agree with me that that needs looking at if there's any funding available. Secondly, Charlotte, Have you got a venue for this Eco Festival?
We have not got a venue for it. We're looking at having it across multiple venues, but it's still in the planning stages. So we're happy to take suggestions.
Okay, thanks. Just a comment now, Jeff. That's okay. You mentioned the Corbin Leisure Farm and how successful that is. I'm going to be biased here, but I'd like to thank and congratulate the staff who run that farm. Mark Saunders, who's my nephew, and his family have been running that for some time now. Very, very enthusiastic. In fact, I think he uses his own birds of prey, which is really good. And just secondly, that picture you said in the beehive, I don't know whether anybody looked, but it's not me in that mask. It looked like me. I got a shock when I looked at it. I thought, oh, that's like rather me or David Coop with glasses. But there you go. Thanks, Chair.
Could I just come back on a few points, Chair, please?
Yeah, Charlotte, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks. So just in terms of Thorntree and Pallister Park, sorry, Pallister Park you mentioned, but I think Thorntree Park, I would say, sits in the same category of needing a lot of investment. We have put forward proposals for both of those parks to receive additional investment via the Towns Fund. We're just waiting on final sign-off for that, so I can't be more in agreement with you there. I visited both parks a couple of months ago, and they're in need of significant investment. I totally agree about the farm. I went there last week in my role, but I also visit almost every weekend because I've got a toddler and spend a lot of time there myself. I did do a shift with Mark with the pigs and the goats, so I know how hard he works and how brilliant he is. And I also think that all of the staff there are absolutely fantastic, and it's been brilliant having that investment as well, led by Jeff. So I couldn't agree more. And I think that those were the final points. Oh, apart from the bee costume, which yes, I can confirm it wasn't you. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to move on to Councillor Branson next, but I can see Jeff Field has got his hand up. I don't know if you want to come in, Jeff, on any of those points. Sorry.
Yeah, just for Councillor Saunders with regard to the Bowling Green, area carer working with the bowlers at Pallister Park to get that ready for the new season. So that is in hand.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for that. Thank you. Cheers, Chair.
Also, I echo the thoughts on Newham Grange Leisure Farm, my treasured possession in Middlesbrough Council. Although it's not anymore because Richard stole it from me. I'm not saying anymore.
Thank you. Councillor Branson?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to say about Newham Grange Farm, it's a marvellous asset. It's really great. It's in my ward, and it's always been something that I think has done the town proud. There are just a couple of things that I'd like to mention about it, though, that it would be useful to think about in future. First of all, you're possibly aware we have a community garden now adjacent to the farm, which is free for access. We also have just got funding for a new play area on Newham Way, which is also adjacent to the farm. Now, the only trouble about the farm, of course, you have to pay to go in. And one of the things that I would like to see is opportunity for more people to come into the park, into the Newham Grange. One thing that it would be useful is whether it would be possible to access the cafe without going into the Newham Grange. I know it was possible in the past. It's not been possible in the future, but it's just a way of getting people to know what is there. The other thing is whether, in fact, there is any prospect for having special reduced price days during summer holidays. What I'm concerned about, I'm sure we're all aware, is that with the impact of higher prices, fuel prices, food prices, and all that, a lot of people are going to struggle, and they're going to have to get put on hold some of the luxuries that they would have had. And one of those, I'm afraid, is likely to be going to Newham Grange Farm. And I just wondered whether there's any way we could help people out by providing that kind of facility at limited times during the year, and that would help those people who were in financial difficulties and who have children. Thanks.
Am I okay to come back to that, Chair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great, brilliant. So just to pick up on your first point in terms of the cafe, Councillor Branson, it's something that we've looked at a number of times, and I will get a definitive answer for you why it's not been operationally possible to do so, because I know previously it was, but that was when the layout of the farm was significantly different. It's something that we have wanted to do and haven't been able to find a solution operationally to implement it, but I'll get some more details on that, Councillor Branson, and come back to you on that. And in terms of your comments around reduced pricing, I think that's a really good point. We have provided reduced pricing and actually free entry for a number of schemes. So for young people, for looked after young people, for example, and also as part of our Holiday Action Fund, they were able to go to the farm and also to the panto for free. It is certainly something that we can look into. The challenges around income targets and making the books balance, and for us the farm is able to make us money so that we're able to subsidize other areas of the service. So yeah, but it's certainly something I'll come back to you on, if that's okay, Councillor Branson. Thanks.
Next is Councillor Coop.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just thinking within my ward, there's very little that Middleton Council Leisure ever puts on. In fact, I can't even think of anything, to be honest. And we have some fantastic areas which Jeff and the council maintains. We have Milers Wood, we have Kelgate Green, etc. With the Friends group, they do. So it's really good what the council do for the area, but we don't actually have anything at all in Stainton. And now we've got Hemlington Grange, which is part of my ward. You've got a huge area being built there. There's no community centre, there's no shops, there's no anything. So I would like to see something possibly done, especially in the south part of the area, to make the people of Hemlington Grange, as they become a community, feel more part of Middlesbrough. So could I put a personal request in for that? Everything in Stainton seems to revolve around the parish council, community council and the memorial hall, and everybody expects them to do absolutely everything, as we just found out with the Queen's celebrations. But it's just something you might consider, talking to me and perhaps the parish council about organising some events in that area, possibly. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Coop. Yeah, I think I'd really welcome some time to chat that through with you. I think that for our events programme, it's fairly fixed, and we've chosen specific areas to deliver specific events based on the wants of the people that are actually delivering the events. So for example, for Nightfall, for Stellar Projects, the council put towards a small amount of match funding, but the actual whole delivery of that event cost over £200,000, which they were able to bring in themselves. So it's quite unusual for us as the organisation to actually deliver events ourselves. Having said that, we do at the moment have a number of funding pots up to £20,000 for external events providers. So yeah, I'd really welcome a further chat with you about that. So I'll make sure that I put an email to you, and we can get some time in the diary.
Great, I would appreciate that. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. I can't see any other panel members with hands up, so I'll bring this this section to an end. Thank you for joining us, Charlotte. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Again, you're welcome to stay, but you don't have to.
Thanks. I'll be going, but thank you very much.
Thank you. I know for agenda item number 4 and 5, we've got a recommendation to have a discussion to see if we need any further information. I'll just incorporate both of them into agenda item number 6, if that's okay, which is the date of the next meeting, which is the 9th of March 2022. But going back to both agenda items, we've got the green strategy review, which we're hoping to finalise pretty much within the next 2 meetings anyway. And we've got like defined topics that we're going to be looking at. But the bus service update, I think that's probably one item that we probably would want to come back to. But I don't know how panel members feel, because it feels like, well, it feels like we keep banging the drum and we don't get any resolution. So maybe keep on banging the drum. I'm not entirely sure. So I just want to get the feel from panel members to see. Councillor Ariel, yeah, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Chair. I spoke to Sue this morning about including an update.
You did, Ron. I do apologise. You did. So if you could do that one, I made a note.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's about it's a grain strategy.
Apologies, Ron.
And I've been involved in grain things long before they were the fashion of the month. So going back 20 years more, I was involved in the creation of the National Forest, and I've worked with a friends group down the Beck for over 10 years. But what I'm talking about today is my success in managing to get the Environment Agency to live up to their promise to plant up the flood prevention scheme on Sandy Flats. It's a huge hole in the ground which they created, which is a holding area for water when we get these huge downpours. And last week I visited, and a couple of lads there have been planting loads and loads of trees, and they're continuing this week to plant more, which I'll go and see this afternoon. And next week, I intend walking with an Environment Agency officer, one of our people from Environment, to look at other areas within the Sandy Flats area. We can plant up lots and lots of trees, which and these microforests we'll be talking about. So it's ongoing, it's quite a good area around there to fulfil our obligation to green up the town. So I just thought I'd let people know what's going on in that area, and by all means, anybody should have a walk around there and see what's going on. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Arundel. Again, apologies. I did make a note to include you there, and it just wasn't in the agenda pack. So, have any panel members got any comments on that? Councillor Branson.
Just briefly to say, obviously, I'd like to make sure the buses things come back. I think it's an ongoing thing, and it isn't going to be easy to resolve for obvious reasons. So I would just support that. So,
yeah. Any other panel members got any comments about the topics we discussed or Councillor Arundel's update? Councillor Coop?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I agree with Councillor Arundel on that. The thing with the green strategy is we all have to get involved, every ward, every council, if you like, to make sure that it goes across the town and it goes correctly, if you like, and things are done in a manner that people actually want. One of the things, for example, is suds ponds. We're building these suds ponds right, left and centre. Who's going to maintain them? I have no idea. There's a big argument at the moment. So it's things like that. We're doing these things, which are all great, but we've got to consider what's going to happen in the future. So that's that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. I can't see any of the panel members with their hands up, so I'll go to the next agenda item. Agenda item number 7, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Board update. The previous meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board was held on the 18th of January. We did not have any executive member in attendance because of the recent changes in executive portfolio. A presentation was given by the Chief Executive, which initially focused on COVID statistics, and then on resident and business grant support, in which the Chief Executive was keen to stress that there are various factors which will cause strains on collection rates for the council. The panel was then presented with the Adult Social Care Services Scrutiny Panel final report on recruitment and retention of staff within adult social care. The panel was then presented with the medium-term financial plan and budget consultation. The presentation started with comparing the budget today as a percentage spent on service areas and compared to 10 years ago. And it was quite interesting. The overall change underscores the pressures that now face councils, particularly Middlesbrough Council. Children and adult social care was allocated about 40% of the overall budget in 2011, and today it's been allocated 67%. With that said, the proposed budget for the year ending 2023 has no service cuts, but has a 2.99% proposed increase with a 1% adult social care precept. And the date of the next OSB meeting will be Tuesday, the 22nd of February. Is there any questions on that? Is there any comments, or okay from members? Councillor Saunders, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that update. It was a really good update. I'm just making you aware, really, Stefan, that the final report. There's a final report from EDI on in the executive on Monday, the 14th at 1 o'clock. Just to make you aware of that, please. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan.
Thanks, Councillor Saunders. Okay, that's everything from that then. The next agenda item is any other items which may be considered urgent. I'm not aware that there is any. No panel members have come forward. Councillor Coope? Yeah.
Yeah, can I just mention one thing about we covered ages ago about the broadband? As you know, it's my topic. I gather from speaking to some people that you have to show an interest in this new broadband that's being installed. And two people that I've noticed have just been told, one in Stainton, one outside the area, oh, we're not coming there. So it just concerns me that we were told at this meeting that all this broadband would be coming, super fast broadband, and it's just not happening. And I know there's a bit of a farce in the centre of Stainton where 5 houses right in the centre of the village have got super fast broadband from BT, and yet everybody else around the area hasn't. So I think we need to look at this strategy again and address it, because we seem to getting nowhere fast. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we were actually discussing that this morning because for the 6th of April meeting, we have got broadband infrastructure as a topic, and we were floating the possibility of inviting City Fibre back just for an update to see, okay, well, this is what was meant to happen, this is what's happened, and just having a look at that subject again. So yeah, I think that's a really valid point, and by luck, we've actually got that on the agenda by the 6th of April meeting. We've already got the next meeting in March solidified. It's already set. So, but yeah, thanks for raising that point, Councillor.
Yes, thanks, Chair, for that. I know it's City Fibre, and I know someone mentioned at the parish council meeting last night he'd applied. He's in the northern part of the village, and he's told, no, you're not going to get it. So I think that's a bit naughty, really.
There's a lot of black spots in the south of Middlesbrough. I know your ward and my ward in particular. No, so thank you. With that, I'll bring the meeting to a close. So thanks to everyone for their attendance, and have a lovely day. Thank you.